Anyone can tell you the news.
We welcome Diamond and Silk.
Mark Zuckerberg will end up, and it's going to be a face without the book.
Book without the face.
Hey, Megan, how are you?
Now they're chipping away at the normalization of pedophilia, and the left is embracing this type of behavior.
We welcome Dinesh D'Souza.
I know I ticked him off. In a certain sense, it's a giant up yours to Obama, and that's why the left is freaking out over it.
Jack Kennedy and LBJ, Clinton, and the double standard from the left.
Yeah, I love how the left does nothing but push the most bizarre practices down our throats and up our tailpipes.
It takes a real man to tackle the hot issues that really matter.
Michael Hart is the man of this house.
Welcome to the Michael Hart Show.
Hello, it is the 21st day of November. It is Thanksgiving Eve, and you're listening to Heart of America with Michael Hart. We're going to be covering a bit of the news of the day, but we're also going to get into some Thanksgiving fare of the intellectual sort, not just the foods sort. Phones will be open a little bit later on today, and that number for you is 929-477-3761, 929-477-3761. As is always the case, the podcast stream will be archived in a variety of sources and places for you to enjoy over the holiday weekend, because we're going to get into some of the unknown myths and little-known oddities about, is it the greatest holiday on earth? I mean, it's the greatest country on earth. I don't know. There are people out there that have the holiday debate all the time. Which is it? I mean, at least in the case of Thanksgiving, you're mostly giving as opposed to receiving. Of course, tomorrow will be Black Friday. If you're listening to this in the archives, you might have already experienced Black Friday. And no, I did it once and never again. But of course, we also have Cyber Monday coming up. If you really want to have a great gift and not have to go to the mall, not have to deal with Black Friday, go over to theunknownamerica.com. As a matter of fact, for those of you that are listening right there on the michaelhartshow.com website, you can also pick up a copy of Unknown America right there. If you'd like multiples, you're going to have to go over to The Unknown America, the website itself, which is standalone, and you can get them for as little as $12, $13 a piece, plus get a free copy of the Constitution. So it's a great way to save yourself a few dollars. All right, there is a bunch of news that we're going to be getting into throughout the course of the day. But, it's one of those things where we got the holidays right here. The kids are, out of school, and grandma's cooking, and, like in my family, the conservatives and the liberals get together, and the wine starts to flow, and the arguments start to break out. It's good times. It's Thanksgiving. It's holiday time. I don't know what it is about the holidays around our household, but at least as it relates to my siblings. But, yeah, there's a whole lot of that. All right, let's just jump right into this and regale you with a few little things that you might not have known. Now, many of you know that in addition to doing this radio broadcast, I do speak on this issue. I do write the things I write about, whether or not it's for my own blog, which I need to really kind of ramp back up again and a little bit on the sluggish side. A lot of, I don't know, just procrastination on my part. But I write, I speak, therefore I am, or never mind. But either way, speak a lot about American history, and not just history that's known history, a good portion. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 100% of the stories of Americana are, if they are not myths, they are at least revised or embellished or slanted or curved or in some other way influenced, sometimes by the media, sometimes by popular culture, sometimes just by time. And this is one of the reasons that beginning sometime next week, we are going to introduce yet another product, if you will, another program under the umbrella of Heart of America. And the name of that program will be Heart of America Presents The Unknown America. But I want to do a little bit of that today as it relates to Thanksgiving, in addition to getting into the news a little bit later on. Now, this particular broadcast today will be 30 minutes shorter than our normal fare, and that is a permanent change. Well, I say permanent. It's the Internet. Nothing's permanent on the Internet. But the point is that we are going to be taking some additional programming time to get a little bit more in depth with some of this long-form stuff. Because a lot of the things that we think we know about this country are patently incorrect, and Thanksgiving is no exception. Betsy Ross did not sew the first flag. We don't know who sewed the first flag. Was she a seamstress? Yes. Was she a real person? Yes, she was. But there's no mention of her by Jefferson or Washington or Adams. There was multiple seamstresses at that period in time in American history sewing flags. You got to bear in mind, there was no mass production for them. The Declaration of Independence wasn't a bunch of old white guys standing around a table signing the Declaration. They would have been hung if they had ever been in a room like that together. No, the signing probably began somewhere around July 4th, which also wasn't the day they voted to be independent. And it didn't end until at least August of that year, and some historians believe could have taken all the way into November. There is story after story after story all throughout American history that people are just unaware of. And I can keep this up all day, which is one of the reasons why whenever I get these invitations to go on radio programs of other people's, that very oftentimes they want to talk to me for 10 or 15 minutes, and we end up going for an hour. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of what we have been taught, the Lewis and Clark expedition as it relates to Sacagawea, for example, didn't quite go down that way. We have had a woman that has served as president. We've had other presidents that have done other very, very odd things. And so it is. And it's like the story, going back to Betsy Ross, people say, well, how do we know? Well, for one thing, in the case of Ross, we never even heard anything about this chick until 1870, when her grandson brought it up and tried to get a magazine and a newspaper to publish a story about her, because he fabricated the whole thing. In the case of like Sacagawea and the Lewis Clark expedition, she was supposed to be a Shoshone princess that led the expedition to salvation, through the Northwest Passage. Yes, she really did exist, but she was actually the wife of one of the interpreters. So how did history paint it this way? Actually, there was a book that came out that did it, and the book was being used as a justification to allow women the right to vote. Oh, it gets into deep, complicated stuff, and some really fun stuff as well. And just a lot of things. Abner Doubleday, he didn't invent baseball. Baseball had been around 50 or 60 years before he was even born. Wasn't necessarily referred to as baseball, but he gets credit for something he did not do. Eli Whitney, yeah, he played a role in the invention of the cotton gin, but he didn't invent it. It was actually a widow that he was living with and a couple of slaves that consulted to him on the construction of that particular piece of equipment. And so all throughout history, there's all these misconceptions about our past and about where we came from. A lot of people don't realize, when we declared our independence, half the country, they were loyal to the king. They didn't want to be independent. The guy on a bottle of Samuel Adams beer, that's not Sam Adams. He didn't even brew beer. His father owned a malt house that sold flour and things to breweries, but the guy on the bottle of Sam Adams is Paul Revere. Why Revere? Because, Sam Adams was a skinny, ugly dude. I mean, I'm sorry, just the way it is. And so, Benjamin Franklin used to write to editorials. Yeah, he actually he was a weird dude, y'all. He wrote a lot in the nude. And he also wrote a lot to newspapers, and he pretended to be a woman. I mean, in his writing. Yeah, but he wrote in the nude. He used to call them air baths. I'm telling you, history through textbooks and teachings all throughout the history of this country, we have passed down these mysteries and these oddities, and they seem to get embellished as time goes along. And then artists pick up and they give an artistic rendition of what they think might have happened, and nobody really knows, or the history books have changed it, or teachers have embellished it. A lot of our history books and textbooks are actually published in Europe. Okay, think about this. History books being published by European publishers. And they're telling the history of the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, which is the Second Revolutionary War. Oh, and by the way, Francis Scott Key was not being held prisoner on a ship. He went there quite voluntarily. So anyway, a lot going on in history that is just absolutely, positively fabricated. That's why I wrote the book. That's why there's a second one coming out. That's why there's a children's version of it coming out. And heaven help me if I could ever find the time to turn this thing into a board game or some kind of a game, maybe a game of some sort for the purposes of really just, I don't know, angering people with Thanksgiving. So what are some of the interesting things? It's one of America's favorite, most enduring, yet totally inaccurate tales, and that is thankful pilgrims gorging on a huge feast to give thanks for a bountiful harvest and show their appreciation to the Indians that helped them survive their first winter. Except it never happened, at least not the way it's been portrayed and taught. So, what are some of the common misconceptions about the origin of one of America's favorite holidays? Well, first and foremost, they didn't know they were pilgrims. They actually referred to themselves as saints. Early Americans used the term pilgrim to describe all of the early colonists. It wasn't until around the 20th century that it was used exclusively to describe the folks who had landed on Plymouth Rock. You see throughout history, historians and authors and teachers and professors, they kind of like what Christians will do with the Bible if they're not careful, is they will extract pieces out of it that suit their narrative to prove a point or to elaborate on something, and in some cases, even to advance an agenda or an ideology. Christian men sometimes, in a failing of faith, will point to the portions of the Bible where it tells women not to deny their husbands unless they are in prayer or they're ill. I don't know if they're using it as some form of marital leverage, but right after that, the Bible says essentially the same thing to the men. But that's a great example of how things are often used to our own benefit. History does the same thing. But in the 20th century, all of a sudden, these guys are the pilgrims. They were all pilgrims. This group referred to themselves again as saints, and not even in the canonization sense. Also thought and taught as though it was a religious occasion. Nope. Guys, the first Thanksgiving. I know, Grandma, you've got those cute little Dixie plates up in the attic with your darling little Susie or Johnny's hand that's made them into a turkey. No, maybe you have, one that's got the little Indian feathers on it or whatever the case may be, or a cross or a Bible. Nope. It was a 3-day hoedown. I'm talking about it was a revival of sorts that included drinking, gambling, sporting events, and even target shooting. The interesting thing about the target shooting, because you got to bear in mind, they all know how to shoot, right? The target shooting was actually intended as a friendly reminder to their newfound Indian friends that they are armed and dangerous. They were making a point. Yes, they got along with the Indians, but this wasn't so much a matter of of the Pilgrims and the Indians hitting it off together because they were all just, happy-go-lucky. You got to bear in mind the Indians would have met these guys with a great deal of suspicion, a great deal of it. And I don't want to get into all the Jamestown stuff today, or what was called King Philip's War, or the Rebellion of Metacom. We'll do that for another day. But in colonial New England, there was a lot of friction between the Indians and the colonists in the early days. The Pilgrims at Plymouth Rock made it pretty clear that they were willing to stand their ground, and one of the ways they did that was by getting pretty darn ruckus, and part of that ruckusness included the use of firearms for target practice. In addition to that, contrary to popular lore, Thanksgiving did not take place in November. The exact date is not even really known. All that's really known is that sometime between late September and the middle of October. The harvest had already been brought in at this point in time, and you have to bear in mind that in colonial England, New England, in late November, it would be blisteringly cold. And so they would not have been sitting around waiting for the feast to be served. Now, my mother lives actually in Wolfsboro, New Hampshire. Okay, not too terribly far away. So let me get out my little app right now, and just here we are, the day before Thanksgiving. Right now in Wolfsboro, New Hampshire, it is 25 degrees. You really think these guys are sitting outside in 25-degree weather? Eating a turkey? No. It happens sometime between late September and October. According to historian Richard Ehrlich, by November, quote, in his book, the villagers were looking to prepare for winter, salting and drying meat and making their houses as wind-resistant as possible. Additionally, the quote-unquote, air quotes here, pilgrims did not dress in black, didn't wear buckles on their hats or shoes. They didn't even wear these tall hats. This is all fabricated by artists in the years that followed. Oh, did you know? No butterballs were injured for the feast. As a matter of fact, the diners ate deer. One of the saints, or we'll stay with tradition as much as we can here, pilgrims, his name was Edward Winslow, later wrote, "For 3 days we entertained and feasted, and the Indians went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation." Now, his use of the word plantation doesn't mean big, obnoxious farm. It does mean farm, but nothing like we would perceive in the Deep South. They're talking about the area from which they resided and which they farmed. Winslow does mention that 4 of the pilgrims went a-fowling, or bird hunting, but neither he nor anyone else recorded which kinds of birds they actually hunted and or whether or not they ever consumed one. And by the way, there's absolutely no evidence that the Pilgrims celebrated again in 1622. The Great Feast of the Bounty seemed to be a very isolated event that for all intent and purposes was never repeated. So essentially what Thanksgiving is these guys come to America, they endure a very harsh winter prior to the next winter. After the harvest comes in and they know that their pantries are stocked, they decide to take a little bit of a break. They go out deer hunting, they get drunk, they gamble their brains out. It's probably, if you remember the Charlton Heston movie, The 10 Commandments, when Heston is upon Sinai, about to descend with the tablets of the 10 Commandments, and he comes down to, O Israel, and finds them all partying at the base of Sinai. That's probably what Thanksgiving in America looked like, something very similar to that. It had been a bad winter. The harvest was bountiful. They decided to eat, so they went deer hunting, got drunk, and threw dice. That's Thanksgiving. However, with that said, because that's just the historical aspects to it, it doesn't diminish what today is all about. It doesn't diminish the fact that we all should give thanks, again, for each of our bountiful harvests, no matter what they might look like. And the fact that on today and tomorrow, throughout the course of the weekend, we will gather with family, we will gather with friends, we will gather with our neighbors and our church family, and we will celebrate the fact that we live in the greatest nation on earth. The Pilgrims reminded us the Indians are irrelevant, the meal is irrelevant, the drinking, the gambling, all of that is irrelevant. What is relevant to this holiday and that we should take away from the story of the first Thanksgiving is the fact that they did it. The fact that they gave thanks for their survival, for their families, for their new friends, for their food, and for their ability to conduct a feast. And those are the things that we need to give thanks for every day of our lives. But if we want to zero them in on tomorrow or even beginning today for many, many of you, that's exactly what we should do. Because at the end of the day, historically speaking, we've got the story of Thanksgiving all wrong, but we've got the rationale behind it all right. You're listening to the Heart of America right here on the Heart of America Radio Network. Stick around. We're coming right back in just a few.
None shall pass.
What?
None shall pass.
I command you, as King of the Britons, to stand aside.
I move for
The Michael Hart Show.
You make me stand.
The Land Report, the magazine for the American landowner, is a proud supporter of the Michael Hart Show. Currently, they're offering an exclusive subscription price for listeners of the Michael Hart Show. So click on the subscribe button on landreport.com and enter the code HARTSHOW at checkout and receive a 1-year discount on America's #1 land magazine. You'll get a full year of the Land Report, which normally goes for $59, for only $15. That's a 75% savings off the cover price. Again, that's promo code HARTSHOW at checkout of thelandreport.com, and make sure to check out The Land Report on Facebook if you love land.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Theme here for just a moment, of the history theme, perhaps, is a better way of putting it. But real quick, a little bit of quick housekeeping. Over the course of the last several days, I have received numerous emails about ways to support the program. And as a lot of you guys are aware, we did cobble together this Patreon page, which allows you to either you can make any one of a number of different donations, and your donations to keep us on the air can be as little as $1 a month. But it seems to be, and by the way, regular patrons like $6, and they'll even have advertising plateaus because the listenership of the program is going up pretty significantly for a program that's only been on the air for 3 weeks. So you can check us out if you go to Michael Hart Show. By the way, this particular broadcast will be archived there. So if you want to really upset some folks at Thanksgiving and make them question about whether or not they should keep those little Dixie plate made little turkeys, maybe you can show them or let them listen to this particular program. But if you go over to the website, you can see the link for Patreon. But several people have complained that it's just not user-friendly, and I apologize for that. I mean, I was not really aware how unuser-friendly it could be. But it's an interesting platform that allows you to support not just this program, but anybody that does this kind of thing all across the country, musicians and artists and things, and that's why I chose it. Well, yesterday we also, on the same website, put up a very simple one-time donate PayPal button. If you want to support the program, the Christian conservative message of the Michael Hart Show, because we want to grow it into other podcasts, the other equipment we can bring on. We want to add a video component to it as well. We'd like to even, bring people on, in terms of staff. Now, this will be part-time staff as well, but it allows us to grow the message of what is really going on in this country. So if you want, and by the way, if you go to PayPal, again, you can do it one time without all kinds of registration and all kinds of personal information. You don't have to, in other words, join a membership team or whatever, but you can also make those donations $1 a month over there as well, or whatever you feel compelled. That's the way we're going to keep this thing afloat, and we appreciate your support any way that you feel like you can. Do not feel an obligation to support the program financially. We're going to do everything in our power to keep it as free, essentially. But, of course, there are aspects to it that are, there's bills that have to be paid, and we'd appreciate all the support we can get. Now, let's stay with this theme for just a moment, not the money theme, the history theme. The story of Thanksgiving is about essentially a party. But this was not unique in American history. Now, one part of Unknown America deals with the Declaration of Independence. We know from writings from John Adams to Abigail that the framers voted to adopt the resolution on the 2nd of July. He wrote that to her in a letter. History has treated it as though it was July 4th, and that's perfectly fine because that's when it was announced. That's when it was actually formally open for the signing to begin. But what's interesting about this is that historians have reported that 2 days before America declared her independence, and historically speaking, we believe the 4th, that there was a major party, a literal hoedown. I even have the list of liquors that were consumed around here somewhere, but that there was a party before the Declaration of Independence was released 2 days before, where, a ton of beer and port and some kind of colonial version of Hunch Punch and Claret and several other different types of liqueurs were served, and these guys were bombed at this party. And it made me wonder if history treats our independence as though it's July 4th, and the historians that have written on it knew there was this party 2 days before, but John Adams said we declared our independence on the 2nd of July. Does that mean the Founding Fathers were bombed when they declared independence? Truthfully, it's fairly likely. Can't you see a couple of them sitting around? Hey, George, watch this. And all of a sudden, we became America? I'm sorry, that's funny right there. I don't care who you are. But drinking and partying and carousing in that time was not even remotely uncommon. Thomas Jefferson had about a $50 a day party habit. He threw a lot of parties in the White House. Now, adjusted for inflation, that would be about $980 in today's currency, a day habit. Now, this wasn't just him. He would have these lavish parties, and they were drinking constantly at this period in time. Now, I'm telling you all that to kind of shore up the idea that in colonial America, for Thanksgiving to have been more of a hoedown is just not even remotely unlikely. The fact is, if you look at the history of this country, particularly in those days and times, it would have been odd for it not to have been A lot of people don't know that Thomas Jefferson was in dire financial straits late in his life. So the then members of Congress purchased a huge portion of his personal library, and those books would become the books that would create and seed the Library of Congress. Yes, the first books in the Library of Congress were to help somebody pay their bar tab. Welcome to America, y'all. I mean, you got to admit, it's not as glamorous as what the history books have taught us. But I mean, who in the right mind? Can you see little Johnny or Sally's history teacher, if they even still teach it in the school districts you might be in, sitting around 4th grade, 5th grade, American history? Yeah, it's likely that the founding fathers were bombed when they got this idea. Yeah, they because it would have been, from their perspective, it would have been quite dangerous. That's why these notions, these depictions of the Declaration of Independence with a bunch of white guys standing around a table or meeting in the town hall, town square, to announce the new nation. Folks, they would have been shot from the gallery. As many as 30-35% of the people after the Revolutionary War had been won were still loyal to the king. We seem to forget these things. Our history has been so revised. Benjamin Franklin, when he wasn't taking an air bath or writing salacious letters to newspapers, was actually in France for the duration of the Revolutionary War. Now, the history books will tell you he was over there fundraising, and he was. You ever been to a fundraiser? Typically, there's an open bar there as well. Now, in the meantime, you got Ben hanging out in France. In the meantime, Mrs. Franklin on her deathbed back in the States. They had their moments. They had their parties. They did a lot of things that would probably make a lot of historians uncomfortable. In some places in colonial America, it was even safer to drink beer instead of the water. So I think it's very important, as we continue to learn more about our nation, that we always bear in mind that so much of what is in these history books is woefully inadequate and inaccurate. And in fact, these guys and gals were just like us, which, if you really think about it, makes America even more remarkable. Now, Franklin was old. He was in his 80s. But a lot of these folks were in their early 20s and 30s. Some of what would be considered the founding fathers, not necessarily signers of the Declaration of Independence, but just early framers, some of the more important colonialists, were in their teens. But yet history seems to fail that. If you look at some of the more popular depictions of the Declaration of Independence, and these guys are painted as older, most of those guys are painted from previous paintings when they were serving in the Supreme Court or their respective districts, their houses, or the Senate. It's an amalgamation of people and not the portrayal of an event. So as we're having our celebrations over the course of this weekend, let's remember to give thanks that this country happened at all. They were a bunch of rowdy, partying, youngster drinkers. How many? Let's really got to get into this for just a second and consider something here. Looking at the news of the day, the people that are, oh gosh, I'm gonna regret saying this, but because it's not necessarily a fair analogy, But they were the Alexandria Cortezes of their day. Not that they were whack in the head like that noodle is, but because they were young. They were impressionable. They were fed up with a system that they found oppressive, and they lashed out against it. Now, you consider Jefferson and Adams and, people like Governor Morris and Thomas Paine, it said Nathan Hale, et cetera, you're not making a comparison to Alexandria Cortez. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is that it was a young person's movement. There were some older grandfatherly types that were involved. But even at this point in time, Betsy Ross, she sewed a flag. We just don't know which flag. She was 21 years old. And I think a lot of people seem to forget that in American history, that in many, many, many cases, they were just like us. And to me, that makes the foundation of this country even more intoxicating. Because it happened at all. They blended with the younger people the desire for freedom and liberty and open expression with the concerns of the older framers, the Franklins of the world, and their concern over economic policy, the Commerce Clause, for example, out of England, which forced the colonists to trade in English currency when doing business with England as opposed to the currency established in the colonies. That was the real impetus for the war, not the Boston Tea Party, but we'll do that a different day. But if you look at what took place at that period of time and how it unfolded, then it being rowdy and raucous like the first Thanksgiving was would be absolutely positively what we would have expected it to be. Because it took rowdy and raucous. It took people with, well, I don't even want to say the words, even on the internet, because I want young people to hear this. But let's just say they have the intestinal fortitude to take on some big chances and make some amazing sacrifices. So the tenets of what we see in the first Thanksgiving, they transfer well over another 150 years-ish to give us what would eventually become a generation so fed up that they would declare independence and then realize they were going to have to man and woman up and defend what they just did. And they did it masterfully. And that is certainly something that we should always remember and be ultimately thankful for.
Your home have a water problem? Drainage around your home can cause all kinds of headaches. Disease-causing mold, cracks in walls, foundation failure, even roof leaks. At Alabama Water Management, we know that problems can often be fixed from where the water is coming from, outside. Our approach is less invasive and less expensive. So, before you spend thousands on a potentially unnecessary waterproofing system, call Alabama Water Management for a free evaluation. Alabama Water Management. Don't waterproof, water prevent.
Find Alabama. The Land Report, the magazine for the American landowner, is a proud supporter of the Michael Hart Show. Currently, they're offering an exclusive subscription price for listeners of the Michael Hart Show. So click on the subscribe button on landreport.com and enter the code HARTSHOW at checkout and receive a 1-year discount on America's #1 land magazine. You'll get a full year of the Land Report, which normally goes for $59, for only $15. That's a 75% savings off the cover price. Again, that's promo code HARTSHOW at checkout of thelandreport.com, and make sure to check out the Land Report on Facebook if you love land.
None shall pass.
What?
None shall pass.
I command you, as King of the Britons, to stand aside.
I move for
The Michael Hart Show.
You make me sad.
of Thanksgiving, and certainly we hope that you have a wonderful and safe celebration with your family and friends. I know it can be a trying time for some. Maybe you don't have loved ones to celebrate with, or maybe your siblings are wackadoodle liberals and just don't really want to talk about anything that makes any importance or that's truthful. And, you know, when you have a sibling that dedicates his life to being truthful about the history of this country, that can be difficult. Another truth that we're going to get into this next week. The President Trump, has been absolutely hammered for California wildfire claims. He has drawn the ire of many Californians for his comments that better forest management could have prevented or at least mitigated the damage caused by the devastating wildfires in the state that have destroyed millions of dollars in property and left 79 people and counting dead and hundreds more missing. You guys that have listened to this program, even today, have heard an advertisement for the Land Report. I know the folks at the Land Report quite well. Next week, we are going to get some folks from that publication, because it is the magazine for the American landowner, as well as some of their people, some of their connections in the forest management industry. And we are going to go completely long form on this one issue. Now, this will not be, I don't think it's going to be on, maybe it will be on Heart of America. I don't know that it will do it on Unknown America podcast or not. Maybe I'll run both of them simultaneously that day. We'll just have to kind of play it by ear. But the reason we're going to do that is for just this story right here. Because the president is right on this. And it is, in fact, land management policies out of the state of California that, if they are not exclusively responsible for this disaster, they have certainly exacerbated an already horrific problem. As recently as last August, outgoing Governor Jerry Brown proposed changes to the state's logging rules that would allow large landowners to topple larger trees and build temporary roads as a way to thin forest across California and possibly prevent the widespread wildfires. Under Brown's proposal, which was supported by the logging industry in the state, but opposed by more than a dozen environmental groups, landowners would be permitted to cut trees up to 36 inches in diameter, a jump from the current 26 inches, on properties that are 300 acres or less without getting a timber harvest permit, and would also be able to build roads up to 600 feet long. The landowners must also prove that the intent for cutting down the trees and building the roads was to thin forest to reduce the fire risk. But the president comes out, says something along these lines. Isn't it interesting, not dissimilar with the travel ban and comments on immigration? This president has essentially come out and said something that other Democrats have proposed in the past and then takes heat for it. How fascinating is that? How disgusting is that you've got environmental groups that are more concerned about the trees than they are life of their residents? And this, again, goes back to what happens when bureaucracies rule the day. Timber industry officials, of which we will speak to sometime next week, supported Brown's proposal and argued that cutting red tape and allowing landowners to cut down their own trees would not only save money, but provide incentives to thin large pine and fir forests that have become hazardously overgrown. Some of the environmental groups agree that a certain level of forest thinning is needed to prevent or lessen the risk of wildfires, but they worry the plan would permit loggers to cut large redwoods and other vulnerable trees that are not under threat from the wildfire. Interestingly enough, the proposal by Brown capped the size of the trees to 36 inches. You ever seen a redwood? Environmentalists just give me a headache. Folks, I love to hike and camp and canoe. Got a basement full of camping equipment. Was an assistant Boy Scout leader. Led many a troop on many an outing. Lived on a farm for some years. Wasn't an operational farm. It was just basically a big plot of land with a really good-sized garden and some chickens and some goats. But it was a farm to me. Point is, I'm an outdoorsy kind of guy. I love boating. I love the beach. I love the mountains. I love hiking. I have not a single anti-environment bone in my body. I'm not a hunter. It's not that I'm opposed to hunting. It's because, to me, it's just too much work. My basic philosophy on hunting is, you kill it, I'll eat it. But I also understand the need for culling deer herds, which is also one of the issues that gets a lot of PETA-esque people all up in arms. No pun intended. But here we have environmental groups that are so bent on protecting these forests. Number one, people are dying, and number two, so are the forests that they claim they want to protect. Sometimes, folks, you have just got to do the obvious. But no, we're going to worry about a tree or a salamander or a turtle, and the population of those communities be damned. Phones are open, 929-477-3761. Let's get out to, we'll start with Clark. Hello, Clark. How are you?
Hey, Michael. How are you?
I am just delightful.
Well, good deal. Oh, boy, I got to get a train of thought. I was talking to Tolly, and you're just right there. A little different. But anyway, so federal judges, did you see, let's see, number one, the president's thing on not granting asylum if you didn't enter properly got overturned by a federal judge in the Ninth Circuit yesterday. Did you see where federal judge determined that the female genital mutilation was a religious thing? And federal law did not apply to that?
Yeah, I did see that actually.
That is just, I don't know. Where do we live? And how is it that a federal judge has not overturned the president's pardoning of the turkey yesterday?
You caught me off guard with that. In the climate that we're currently in, Clark, that wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Well, I mean, I kind of been waiting to hear that a federal judge has overturned the presidential pardon of the turkey because the president did it.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. That's actually pretty funny.
I don't know. And then, I was reading this morning, and we briefly talked about Alexandria Cortez yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
She was wanting to take over the three branches of Congress, but then she corrected herself. And you remember, I talked about Alex Trebek in Jeopardy?
Mm-hmm.
Can you see her ringing in on United States government? And then them showing executive, judicial, and legislative. And then there's total silence until Alex says, sorry, that would have been, what are the branches of the federal government?
Right.
Because that would have just totally gone by her, I think. I don't know.
She's a nut, Clark. I mean, she's a complete nut. And the citizens of New York have elected a complete nut.
Well, she's, yes, a duly elected nut.
Mm-hmm.
And you look and look and look, and we're just getting more and more and more of that. Oh, I don't know. It's kind of scary.
Well, you know, earlier today, I don't know how much the program you listened to, but earlier today we got into, you know, the history in the midst of Thanksgiving. And the problem is, and one of the reasons that, you know, I wanted to write a second edition of Unknown America, and I've had some people ask me for a children's version of it as well, is the fact that our history books are so unbelievably incorrect. And the history of this country has been it's been dumbed down to be so remarkably childish, like with Thanksgiving, you know, a bunch of guys running around with belt buckles on their shoes and their hats, you know, having a feast with Indians with maize and turkey, and how delightful that all sounds, and how infantile it's really portrayed. But, you know, it's stories like that over the years that get embellished time and time and time again that birth a generation of Alexandria Cortezes that don't know anything. It's so bad. We have got a woman in Congress that does not know what a congressperson does, that does not understand the structure of government. She's talking about overturning and implementing things that the House of Representatives doesn't even do. It's absolutely insane, and that's because we have dumbed down America.
You kind of wonder at what point in her schooling was the Constitution ever actually read? And probably
Clark, they don't teach the Constitution in constitutional law studies. They just teach precedent.
Yes, and what somebody else said the Constitution should mean.
Yeah.
Is what they talk about. You know, I was thinking when you were talking about the Pilgrims and whatnot, I was reading on English history, I don't know, it's been 20, 30 years ago, and they briefly touched on Robin Hood. And what the author said was, if Robin Hood never actually existed, he was created of necessity.
Yeah.
And, well, you know, a lot of our quote-unquote history is just a means of indoctrination.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right.
And, you know, kids are going to be indoctrinated one way or another. They are. And I guess, you know, pragmatically, you just kind of have to accept that fact. And if that's going to be the case, let's have them indoctrinated in a way that will be beneficial to our society instead of detrimental. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I don't know how to pull it off necessarily. But here's another problem that I think we have is that, you know, there's not a lot of people, and you guys were very, very complimentary with me yesterday, talking about, you know what we try to do in this program. That's why we're trying to stay on the air on the program, is because we think these things are important. You have supported us. Others have supported us. That's why we sound like, you know, we're a darn NPR out there doing a fundraiser, because we kind of are, because we feel like it's that important. Because here's the problem. Not only are these kids not learning the right history, their parents don't know it in a lot of cases. And I'm not faulting the parents on that, because until 10, 15 years ago, I didn't know it. You got to get into it. And that's why we're breaking this broadcast into a live broadcast and a podcast that'll get deeper and deeper and deeper into this kind of stuff, because not only do the history books change the meaning in terms of Thanksgiving, they're doing it every day on the news as well. You know,
right.
Trump, like, you know, with getting torn up by these environmentalists over his comments about land management. And then it turns out Jerry Brown's been trying to do with the land management thing for 6 months now. The media is every bit as culpable of changing the narrative as these textbook publishers are.
Well, Donald just was impolitic enough to come out and say the emperor had no clothes on that deal.
Yeah.
And, you know, interestingly enough, once he brought it out, we find out that, yes, Jerry's been trying to make some changes there, so maybe they won't have massive fires. But anyway.
Well, think about this also, though. The people outside, the people that are in the land industry, whether it's logging or not, have been saying the exact same thing, as I understand it, for over 20 years. How much death and destruction has occurred in the Pacific West and Northwest in the last 2 decades that possibly could have either been avoided or mitigated based upon these idiotic policies? And how many times have you heard me say, Clark, that Democrats constantly lobby for policies and programs and laws that are counterintuitive to their own best interest? Now, do you see the irony of passing environmental laws to save trees and in the end killed trees? That's how ignorant they can become.
Well, it's like I said yesterday, a lot of times they have ulterior motives when they initiate the programs they initiate. And even when they don't have bad intentions, their programs result in very bad results.
They do.
Because
they're all based on emotion and not logic.
Have you ever watched a really good pool player play the game?
Oh, yeah. In person.
Okay, so every shot they take, they're looking at where the balls are going to be for the next shot.
Sure.
I think those people, they can look at the balls when they break, and they know where the last shot's going to end up because they can see that far into the game. And the problem with the left is when they do have good intentions, they don't see 2 or 3 shots later. They marginally see what's going to happen on the first shot. And that's the reason, they don't look and see what consequences are going to be 6 months, 1 year, 5 years down the road. It's immediate gratification and no consideration for what's going to happen later.
Right.
And, then stuff turns around and bites us in the rear end because of decisions they made.
Yeah, and then 80 people perish with their lives, and millions and tens of millions of dollars of property are lost, and lives are destroyed. Absolutely, because of their idiot. And again, you've got all these California Hollywood whack jobs out there screaming at the top of their lungs in support of these type of programs, and then their own houses get destroyed. The irony is just stunning.
Pretty much. And, the tragedy there, Michael, is a lot of them, they're not really bad people. They're well-intentioned people, but they're just so well misinformed.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
They have to make a proper decision on something, apparently.
I don't know. It's heartbreaking, Clark, but, we've seen it play itself out time and time again.
Yep. Well, Michael,
Clark, I hope you
keep getting that.
We're going to try. And I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving, Clark.
You do the same, bud.
We'll do it. And we will not be here tomorrow, but we will be back live Friday if you get bored and want to tune in. All right, guys, going to take a real quick break, come back on the other side. We're going to wrap this thing up in about 30 minutes or so because we're going to start abbreviating the program just a little bit as we can get a little more long form into some of the things, and that's what I was talking to Clark about. It's about getting the message out there because we've got so much ignorance in this country, and I don't mean necessarily, people that are stupid because he is right about something. You have a lot of folks out there that are just patently misinformed, and that's why we're asking for your support of the program because, we've got to keep the lights on. We got to have the right equipment. We got to take it out into different platforms as well. So if these things concern you, if the future of this country concerns you, if education of young people concerns you, if you want to try to make a change or a difference, then we ask you for your support. It's very easy. Just go to michaelhartshow.com if you're not already there. There's a Patreon button, which allows you to do monthly contributions. You want to do something just one time, whatever your heart leads you to do. You can go over to the PayPal thing, and some people prefer PayPal anyway, because all you have to do is just do it. You don't have to worry about joining the Patreon platform. Patreon's a little more complex. It allows you to do a few other things, allows you to read some of this stuff that we're doing and some other free gifts and things like that we're going to be putting up there as well. But at the end of the day, either one of them will allow you to make a contribution. Again, Patreon is for your monthly contributions and PayPal for your one-time contributions. And we'd appreciate your support so very much because we got a country to save. And if you agree with that, we would appreciate your support. Going to take a real quick break, come back on the other side, hit on a few other news topics of the day as we prepare to wrap up this edition of Heart of America with Michael Hart right here on the Heart of America Talk Radio Network. The Land Report, the magazine for the American landowner, is a proud supporter of the Michael Hart Show. Currently, they're offering an exclusive subscription price for listeners of the Michael Hart Show. So click on the subscribe button on landreport.com and enter the code HARTSHOW at checkout and receive a 1-year discount on America's #1 land magazine. You'll get a full year of the Land Report, which normally goes for $59, for only $15. That's a 75% savings off the cover price. Again, that's promo code HARTSHOW at checkout of thelandreport.com, and make sure to check out The Land Report on Facebook if you love land.
Is your home's crawl space making your... Let Alabama Water Management inspect your crawl space today. A wet, moldy crawl space can cause serious foundation problems. They are breeding grounds for disgusting odors, polluted air, potentially harmful allergens, and volatile organic compounds that can actually make breathing difficult and the air in your home very unhealthy. Don't take chances with your family's health. If your home has a crawl space, call Alabama Water Management today for a no-cost, no-obligation crawl space inspection.
Find Alabama Water Management on Facebook or on their website at ALAH2O.com.
Okay, what's this lame meeting about?
No idea, and I'm busy and go away.
Improve your work environment.
Ow! Ow! Hostile work environment.
Shut up! With these simple tips. Be politically correct.
Lana, they're called little people,
Will
not
you
hobbits. What? There's your bomber, Beardsley McTurbanhead.
Give compliments.
Great, good job.
Shut up!
Diffuse conflict.
Pam, I will end you.
Respect boundaries.
Get out of the way!
What? Are you going to shoot me again?
Yes!
Oh. Well, then hang on.
Listen effectively.
Thoughts?
Yeah, shut up.
Shut up.
Oh, shut up. Shut up.
No rubbish. Shut up.
Imagine shutting up. Why do you always do that?
Why do you always not shut up?
Compromise.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Project confidence.
I am awesome.
And you'll win friends.
What about that are you still not getting exactly?
Well, obviously the core concept, Lana.
It's the Michael Hart Show.
Come again?
The Michael Hart Show.
You know I don't speak Spanish. In English, please.
A liberal dose of conservatism.
How'd you do that? I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
Welcome back. You're listening to Heart of America with Michael Hart. It's on the Thanksgiving Eve. As throughout the course of the day, we've been talking a bit about American history, the things that are wrong in history, and things that we can do to change it. And that's why I wrote the book, Unknown America, and we're going to be doing a whole lot more Unknown America stuff. And the neat thing about the podcast that we're going to be doing is that the podcast is going to contain stuff that will be in the next book. So for those of you that are interested in learning even more fascinating things about this country, and not just our history, I mean, some of the stuff that we contain in here even deals with things like World War II, the Vietnam War, even the Korean War. It's interesting that, enough, that a lot of folks don't realize that the United States almost got into a war with North Korea over a poplar tree, and a lot of stories like that and things that are going on in the press, because that's one of the reasons that a lot of the things you're seeing on your TV set today, they don't make any sense, or that they are a little misleading or confusing, or, that people don't do that. No. People can't be that way. No. There's no such thing as, I don't know, voter fraud in America. No. An alleged voter fraud scheme in which Skid Row homeless people were being offered money and cigarettes in exchange for false and forged signatures on ballot petitions has been uncovered in Los Angeles, prosecutors announced just late yesterday. The L.A. County District Office says it's charging 9 people in total with felony counts related to the offenses, which are said to have happened during 2016 and the 2018 election cycles. The defendants are accused of engaging in the solicitation of hundreds of false and or forged signatures on state ballot petitions and voter registration forms by allegedly offering homeless people $1 and or cigarettes, in this case the cigarettes would be the better value, for their participation, according to a statement from the attorney's office. The charges, it added, including circulating a petition with false names, use of false names on a petition, voter fraud, registering a fictitious person, and registering a non-existent person. The attorney's office said prosecutors have recommended bail to be set at $25,000 each. The charges are part of a larger scale crackdown on voter fraud that the LA Police Department has been undertaking this particular year. Some of the petitions, by the way, in which the false signatures have been collected on include proposals on oversight commission for the Sheriff's Department and other matters relating to clean water and air in California. They're making up environmental voters. Yeah, then there's that. How cute. And again, you see another perfect example of people, particularly on the left, lobbying for programs and policies and laws that are counterintuitive and productive for their own personal needs. So let's put that one away. We'll put the Trump wildfire story away. We're actually going to put that over here because we are going to be talking to some land management experts next week and get a little bit more into what's going on with the state of California and why the Environmental Protection Agency out there is so willing to allow people in that state to suffer and lose their homes and their loved ones. Death toll now is at least 79 people in the wildfires. Hundreds, and that is plural, are missing. And so it continues on with containment yet to be a fantasy for some time in the future. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy announced Monday that the state would set aside more than $2 million to provide legal aid for low-income immigrants facing deportation. He announced the allocation in the current fiscal year's budget hours before a federal judge barred the Trump administration from enforcing a recently enacted rule denying asylum to anyone who crossed the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. Families who came to New Jersey, this is a statement, by the way, for a better life do not deserve to be torn apart by the federal government's cruel and discriminatory policies. Really? First off, they're not being torn apart. Secondly, a lot of these folks are leaving people back home, so they are, if they're tearing apart, self-tearing. The budget agreement calls for $925,000 to go to Legal Services of New Jersey and the American Friends Service Committee Legal Services. It's a nonprofit that helps low-income residents. The Friends Committee is a Quaker immigrant rights organization. And for some strange reason, out of this money, both Rutgers and Seton Hall law schools will also get $125,000. Yeah. New Jersey joins other Democrat-controlled states. Wait for it. Like you have. Let's all say it together. New York and California. That offer legal help to poor immigrants. Last year, a public-private partnership to help immigrants was announced in New York, whose immigrants are detained at Immigration and Customs Enforcement facilities in New Jersey at the Bergen and Hudson County facilities. State Senator Kristen Corrado said she's concerned about Murphy constraining legal services' ability to help residents, including seniors and veterans, by requiring organizations to spend on immigration aid. So, we're done with that one. A little bit of infighting there as well. We're going to wrap this thing up here in just a bit. But I want to really double down on the fact that you really need to pay attention and get into the news of the day. Now, I realize that families are gathering and assembling today and probably the last couple of days, and will be assembled throughout the course of the holiday weekend. We will not be on with you live tomorrow, but we will be back on Friday morning as usual. Try to kick off the Unknown America podcast Monday or Tuesday of next week. That is just dependent upon getting the technology squared away and the storylines all taken care of. But I do want to encourage you not just to, check out the news of the day and do your own due diligence, but it might be a good idea for everybody in this country right now to take just a nice, big, long, collective breath, because the crazy is just getting palpable out there. And there are so many people that are so disenfranchised from reality that I think it's a good opportunity for all of us just to take a nice collective breath and be thankful for whatever it is we got, whether you got a big old turkey in the oven or whatever the case may be. And then we're going to really get back to work, not just on doing Friday's program, but the following Monday, as we do everything in our power to try to inject some common sense into what is going on in this nation. And that, again, is why we seek your support. You can pick up a copy of the book Unknown America. If you go to theunknownamerica.com, you can get multiple copies discounted there. They make great Christmas gifts, and you're going to have to do it now if you want them in time for Christmas. I mean, you got a couple more weeks, but after that, it's going to be very difficult to get these things to you, as we've gotten hit up pretty hard in the last few days with a lot of, multiple orders. But anyway, that said, please remember, and by the way, the podcast, Unknown America, will be a PM show. It will go on in the evenings. Now, you don't necessarily have to listen to it live because it's going to be archived, but we would love for you to check it out when we do finally announce it. Also, when you go over to the Hart of America, or in this case, actually Hart of America would work, but either way, michaelhartshow.com, and click on the Listen Live link at the top of the page. It takes you over to the Blog Talk platform, which is who we're actually using to get the audio out. It gives you an opportunity to follow the program there. We'd appreciate the follow, but that information doesn't even come to us. But what it does is it allows us, through Blog Talk, to communicate with you that certain shows are about to kick off. So that's a great way to stay up with the program as well. There's multiple ways, and also you can download the iTunes, and you can also download the TuneIn app, and you can share this program with others. As a matter of fact, on the TuneIn app, after the show has been archived, and if you want to teach people about some of the fallacies of Thanksgiving, it actually has an email component to it as well. So a lot of different ways to interact with the show as we continue to grow this thing out and add audio as well. The video, is going to come, and the video is going to be really interesting as it relates to the podcast, because it's going to allow me to give you visual aids. I get in so much trouble when I talk about how Rosa Parks wasn't the first woman to refuse a bus seat. Matter of fact, it was 15-year-old Claudette Colvin, but it actually happened in New York 100 years prior as it relates to a streetcar. So that particular historic, it's quite a little historical anomaly there, that if you don't know about the past, yeah, you're condemned to repeat it, obviously. But then again, looking at the news of the day would create the illusion that all hell is breaking loose and that so many of us are sitting around just fiddling while America burns. And the reality of it is in a lot of cases, we have been at a lot of these places already. So make plans to check out the podcast and go to theunknownamerica.com and pick up a copy of the book. Follow the program, and if you can support us economically speaking, we would appreciate that as well. Let's go ahead and get a few of our little sponsor things out of the way and come back on the other side and mop up the Thanksgiving Eve edition of the Michael Hart Show.
Home have a water problem? Drainage around your home can cause all kinds of headaches. Disease causing mold, cracks in walls, foundation failure, even roof leaks. At Alabama Water Management, we know that problems can often be fixed from where the water is coming from, outside. Our approach is less invasive and less expensive. So before you spend thousands on a potentially unnecessary waterproofing system, call Alabama Water Management for a free evaluation. Alabama Water Management. Don't waterproof, water prevent.
Find Alabama Water Management on Facebook or on their website at alah2o.com. The Land Report, the magazine for the American landowner, is a proud supporter of the Michael Hart Show. Currently, they're offering an exclusive subscription price for listeners of the Michael Hart Show. So click on the subscribe button on landreport.com and enter the code HARTSHOW at checkout and receive a 1-year discount on America's #1 land magazine. You'll get a full year of the Land Report, which normally goes for $59, for only $15. That's a 75% savings off the cover price. Again, that's promo code HARTSHOW at checkout of thelandreport.com, and make sure to check out the Land Report on Facebook if you love land.
You don't have to agree with Michael Hart. You can choose to be wrong if you want to.
Hey, welcome back. Let's go ahead and get this thing all wrapped up with a bow. Do us a favor, if you don't mind, if you're enjoying what we're putting out here on the Heart of America radio network, please tell family members. Please help us spread the word. We're trying to get as much out there as we possibly can. Gives us the opportunity to get away from just the terrestrial signal that we had when we were on a terrestrial signal, and allows us to take this thing worldwide. If you read the books, the Left Behind series, Tim LaHaye and Jerry Jenkins, I got an opportunity to interview both these guys. Of course, LaHaye passed away some years ago. But wasn't it interesting when you consider the fact that after the rapture, and we're deeply entrenched in the tribulation years, that as those that were left behind attempted to convert more to the faith, that they did these, what was that, the rabbi's name? It completely slipped my mind, but he did his sermons online, and he developed this major following of people that wanted to convert to Christianity, to accept the Lord Jesus Christ as their Savior. And we're trying to do something. We're not talking about salvation here, but obviously we're talking about education at the very least. So we're going to kind of, take this a little bit further. And I don't mean just in terms of geography. I'm talking about in terms of what we cover and really start to educate people about what's going on in the country around us today. Because quite frankly, you can get your news from wherever. But I was thinking about this the other day. Why in the world would I just want to sit around and do the same kind of dry news reads that you can find on your CNNs and your MSNBCs? I realize I have somewhat of a saltier style, and that might be appealing to some people. But at the end of the day, most of what's out there is crap anyway. So, we want to get into some of the deep historical stuff because I've always said that we are trying to break down the news of the day through the prism of the past. And I'm very serious about that. And so we want to take a look at perhaps, like there's a story here, the perils of taking on Nancy Pelosi. We need to look at the perils of previous speakers of the House and some of the things that have gone on with previous administrations so that we're getting people to learn what the past of this country is, because the solutions for the future reside in the past. If we don't educate people and we don't take the time to do our own due diligence, we end up, let's stop right there and think about this for just a minute. Okay? I'm going to try to get Alexandria Cortez on the program. For some reason, and it's not that I want to argue with her, but for some reason, I'm just mesmerized by this woman. I am mesmerized by her ignorance of the facts and reality. I don't necessarily want to take her on. I just want to talk to her. I'm not debating somebody that's I told a friend of mine some years ago, I'm about 6 feet tall, weigh right at 200 pounds. And I'm not inexperienced in the use of my fists. But, back in my wild woolier days, I would never take a swing at a guy that was 5'4". I just, I felt it rude, no matter what he did, unless he pulled a gun or something. And I'm kind of that way with people that I consider to be, intellectually challenged. But if we continue on the path that we are currently on, education-wise, we end up with an entire country of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes. Can you imagine? Now, I'm well aware that a good portion of this audience is in the Deep South, because that's where the program originated. When we went from the big stick to the internet, we took a lot of you with us. We're well aware of that. So I think sometimes there might be this illusion that it can't happen here. You're crazy. You're absolutely crazy if you think it can't happen here in the Deep South. Excuse me, may I introduce for your consideration Stacey Abrams? That's on Georgia. Of course, you probably also heard that many Hollywood elites now are refusing to participate in any movie projects out of Georgia because of Abrams' loss. That had happened just a few decades ago. We wouldn't even have Smokey and the Bandit. And they passed through Georgia. They're actually going to, never mind. The point is that if we don't go out of our way to help educate people in this country, then we are going to end up with people like Amber Tamblyn. Yep. 35-year-old actress. She got her start on the soap opera General Hospital. She spoke at Vulture Fest Feminist AF reading series when she shared an essay about her experience with fellow celebrities like Amy Schumer and America Ferrera. She then shared her grim-sounding story from the 2016 presidential election and the impact the aftermath had on her as an expectant mother, Amber, revealed during the talk that she had brief thoughts of having to give her child away to Canada or Sweden in the wake of Donald Trump's election. Pardon me, I have to take a pill. That was a metaphor, by the way. So she's so freaked out because she doesn't know anything, right? She is short on the facts, short on reality, because reality sucks. So Amber Tamblyn describes that her panic is so bad on the election of Donald Trump that she considers giving her baby to Canada. Not somebody in Canada. She's giving the baby just to the kid, to the country. I guess she's just going to start driving north, cross the border, kick it out, turn around and come home. Doesn't say anything about her going to Canada. She's just going to give her baby away to Canada. To the whole country. Or Sweden. Then she said, while considering her unborn child, I swigged some more Zantac and my baby shoved her foot into my ribs. Yeah. A dark realization swallowed me. I was going to bring a baby into this world, and not just any baby, a girl. Revealing that is when she had thoughts of giving her daughter away to Canada to save her from the perceived horrors she saw upcoming in Donald Trump's presidency. Ladies and gentlemen, as we close out today, Amber Tamblyn, Alexandria Cortez, and so many others are a byproduct of our failings, and I am speaking to you, conservatives, our failings in terms of getting the word out and educating people. But first, we must be educated ourselves. And so we ask you to spread the word of this program around to as many people as you know. Support us financially if you can. But just listen and learn and tell people what you heard here today. Don't go to the church of the painful truth and leave at the altar, leave in the pews the things you have learned here today, lest we end up with more Ambers and Alexandrias. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll be back with you on Friday. The program will be archived a little bit later on today and at michaelhartshow.com. If you want to play it out for the younger people in the room to teach them the real facts about Thanksgiving. We would appreciate it so very much. And for those of you that have already done so, thank you for following the program. Have a safe, wonderful, happy Thanksgiving, and we will be back with you on the Friday edition of Heart of America, the Michael Hart Show, right here on the Heart of America Talk Radio Network. Bye-bye now.
Be Catholic!